Hello everyone, it's Katrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique, and I'm back today to finish up this adorable little bead embroidery beginner project that we started a week or so ago. And we are going to today take this one and finish it up so that it looks like this one. So to get started, the first thing we're going to need to do is obviously put some thread onto a beading needle. And I have about a half a wingspan or a little bit more of the 0.006 fire line onto a very bent up size 10 or 11 beading needle. It doesn't really matter about size at this point, as long as your needle can fit through these crystals and some 11O seed beads. And these are the same materials we used that I told you about in the previous video. These are the Potomac beads, apricot AB 2mm rounds. I just absolutely fell in love with these. And then for my 11Os, I'm going to continue using the galvanized perma-finish Toho Starlight round seed beads. So once again, we are going to be tying a knot into our thread. So I'm just going to take the tail end of this thread and I'm going to bring it around and tie the first half of a knot. And then I'm going to take the little tail here and I'm going to come back through again through the center like that. Here, and I'm going to pull this knot down just like that. We've got a couple of layers that we're going to be sewing through here, as you remember that we glued these ultra suede on the back at the end of the last video. Then, of course, we have our interfacing that we did our first stitching around this beautiful Potomac bead marquee crystal. And we'll be sewing through both of these at each pass. Now, one knot should be enough. But if you find that you need to tie a second knot, you can just go ahead and do the same thing again with the thread, pass it through twice, and then just pull really slowly, and the knot should land right on top of the other one, just like it did in the first video. I've got 33 crystals here sewn around this particular component, so I'm going to count out my crystals because I want to come out with the same amount. And the reason that I want to do that is because I'm going to be adding these accent 11O beads, and I'll be adding a series of 2 all the way around, and then I'm also going to use the top 3 crystals here to add my little bail loop. So once I pass my needle under between the 2 layers of the suede and the interfacing, I'm just going to come up. And I'm going to pull that knot so that it sits inside that layer between those 2 layers, just like that. If you'll notice that I brought my working thread here in front, or between the 11O seed beads and the delicate peyote bezel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little piece of tail, and I'm left-handed, so I'll be sewing with my left hand and coming down around the outside edge in this direction. So I'm going to take this little scrap of tail and I'm going to hold it over here out of my way. So now we're going to do some brick stitch along this edge, and what we want to do is grab a hold of our ultra suede, and we're going to be creating a layer that covers this edge here so that none of this interfacing is visible. But to start with brick stitch, the very first stitch, you have to pick up 2 beads. So I'm going to pick up 2 of these little crystals. And then I'm going to let those drop down to the edge. So I'm going to gently hold these beads with my index finger here, and I pull this thread tight. I need to gauge where I want to stick the needle on the back side of my beadwork so that I don't create a huge gap between where my initial thread is coming out and where I go in with my needle. So I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to come up to the back side, and I'm just going to grab just a little tiny bit of that ultra suede with my needle, and I'm going to come back up through the interfacing, and I'm going in between those 11 and the peyote bezel again. So I'm just going to come right back up. And I'm going to hold these beads in place as I work. So now I'm going to come up through the second bead I picked up, which is going to be closest to the direction I'm working here. I'm going to pull that up so that the bead sits standing upwards, and the whole orientation is facing in a straight line out like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and straighten up that first bead. So I'm going to come through that bead, and at the same time I'm going to come back through the interfacing underneath those 11 beads again. But I don't want to come through, I don't want to go so far that I'm actually going into my peyote bezel. I'm just going to come through like that, so that the two beads line up side by side. And don't worry, as we get to the end of this, it'll even look better, because we will have a stitch here on the interfacing on the ultra suede that will also come up through that bead and further stabilize it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come under, well, I shouldn't have came through the 11 O's. I'm just actually going to come back out by passing my needle under those beads. I shouldn't have went through those. I should have just come through the interfacing. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back around, and I'm going to step up back through that second bead one more time. And if you take a step and you don't like it, just remember to pull the needle off of the thread, and then you'll be easily able to back any stitch out that you don't like. So this is what I have now. So now I can pick up one bead at a time. I'm going to pick up a crystal and drop it down. I'm going to come through just a little dab of that ultra suede. You can see here, you want to keep all of your stitches kind of consistent. If you look on the back of this one, you see that the stitches are all pretty consistent going around on the ultra suede. You don't want any that are too far deep in or too close to the edge that it actually could rip out later. So I've got that in a pretty good spot, so I'm going to come on through. Then I'm going to sew back up through the crystal. And that looks pretty good. So that's basically all I'm going to do until I get all of my crystals stitched on the outside edge of my component. Pick one up, lay it over so that you can gauge where to put the needle. Come through the ultra suede in the interfacing. You don't have to come through under the 11s if you think that your interfacing is a little bit sturdier and you trust it not to fray. I don't trust mine not to fray. I'm just going to keep doing it this way. It's how I did the other component, passing, behind those 11 O's here, our decorative 11 O's. And you want to cinch those crystals up so that they're side by side as you work your way around. We'll do a couple more, and then I'll let you go off and finish this round by yourself. Just let those drop down. Gauge where you're sticking your needle on the back, so that it's, consistent. Then pass back up through the crystal. And that, your thread gets hidden because it will actually, as you pass back up, the thread you're working with is going to cinch itself down in between these 11 O's all the way along. So you really aren't going to have any thread showing, as you can see here. It's no exposed thread. All right, let's do one more. I'm going to pick up the crystal, carry it down. Going to lay it around like this. so that I can gauge where I want to stick my needle through, making sure that I get through the ultra suede and the interfacing. And I'm coming up behind those 11-0s, as you see right there. Or actually, I should say in front of them, because they're facing me, but you get the point. And then pass back up through the crystal. Secure your thread in. Make sure that all your beads are sitting nicely beside each other, just like with any other brick stitch that we've done. We don't want to pull so tight that the crystals pop out or too close together so that one pushes forward or back as we work along. We want them in a nice line, and we want them on an even plane with the interfacing line here. So everything stays on this plane as we work along. All right, so what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to go ahead and go off camera. There's no sense in us sitting here and you guys listening to me shoot the breeze as we work. I'll show you this last one. I've got my crystal on. I carry the thread around the back so I can gauge where to put this needle. I come through the interfacing, making sure that I'm being consistent with where I stick my thread through. Sorry, I lost that one. Hold on one sec. I'll try it again. After I poke this needle through, I'll flip it and show you. You can see here that I'm being really consistent on my insertion through the micro suede, so that all the stitches look pretty uniform and are relatively in a line coming this way. All right, then we're going to pull on through. Then complete the stitch by coming back up from bottom to top through that crystal and securing it nicely up against the previous crystal. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish up my 33 crystals, and I'll meet you back for the next step. So as I've worked my way around adding my crystals, if you notice here that I've got this little tail thread with my knot kind of sitting here, and my knot's just a little bit raised. So what I want to do is, as I add these last crystals, I want to secure that knot in between the interfacing and the suede on the back. But before I do that, I need to cut a little bit of this thread off. So I'm going to use this little thread zap here, and I am just going to come in fairly close to my knot and trim off that little excess piece. And as I work, I am going to make sure that I secure this knot down here underneath like that. Let's hold it with my finger and it should be fine as I add my last few little crystals here. So go ahead and add those and we'll come back. Okay, so here I have come around and I've got most of my crystals added, but I've run into a little bit of a problem, so let's go ahead and troubleshoot this really quick. So what I've wound up with, I need an odd number of beads of crystals around this outside edge. And in order for my decoration, my little accent beads to come out correctly. So as you can see here, I'm not going to have enough room to add 2 more crystals in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and close up this beadwork as it is right now. So in order to do this, the first thing I need to do is come down through this crystal right here. The very first crystal I added, I'm going to come down through that bead. And as I do that, I want to make sure I don't pass underneath any threads. You can see that little piece of a white thread under there. You want your needle clean, in other words, with no white thread on top of it. Just coming through the crystal, and that's it. And then we're going to pass up through the very last crystal. And what we're doing is we're square stitching those 2 beads together, so that when I pull it all nice and secure, those 2 beads are actually stitched together. So what I need to do now is I need to actually put a stitch on. You can see here I need a stitch between this crystal and my ultra suede. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to come back down through that very first crystal. I flip my work over here. I'm going to come through the ultra suede, just where I would want that stitch to go. It's a little too far down. I'm going to come up just a little bit. So here you see I'm coming back down through the crystal. Here's the working thread. And I've passed through the ultra suede. So now I'm going to pull that through. I'm going to kind of tuck the edge of that ultra suede up under that crystal. And I'm just going to come right back up through that same crystal. And now I've connected that bead to the backing, as you can see here. All right, so now that I am exiting from this bead, we're going to use this, the top 3 beads to add the bail. So you can see here I have 5 11-0 seed beads that make up my bail. So I'm going to pick up 5 of my 11-0s. All right, so I'm coming out of this crystal. I am going to skip the middle crystal, and I'm going to come down through the crystal on the other side, the third crystal. Give me just a sec here to get myself straightened up. All right. I'm going to pull those beads so that they form a little bail here sitting at the top, just like that. Now all we need to do is sew up through that crystal to the right. And before I carry on, I'm going to grab a pair of pliers and kind of straighten this bent needle up just a little bit. Now to finish up with our little accent beads along the side, we'll just be using sets of 2. So I'm going to pick up 2. Before I carry on with this, one other thing I wanted to note. If you do not like the look of your white fire line or other beading thread that you used here, before we add the remainder of these accent beads, I'm going to take this orange Sharpie, and I'm simply just going to color along those white threads to give them a different appearance. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Making sure to stay, you know, here on the thread and not go running around to the side of my crystals with this orange Sharpie. Just want to basically touch up the thread. Makes it less noticeable. Optionally, you could have used a nylon beading thread in a matching color so that you can skip over this part. You don't have to do this part if you don't mind. It's not really noticeable from afar. I just prefer to color it in a little bit. And I can actually loosen up that little bail of beads there because I haven't stitched forward yet. And add some orange color to the white thread underneath. All right. So now we're exiting from this crystal. We are going to pick up the 2 11-0s and simply sew down the next crystal. And once, make sure that you don't snag a thread under there. If you'll notice, let me tap my camera, that my needle is clean here and there is no white thread on top of it. It's really not great if you hook a thread. And up through the next crystal. And we're just going to do that all the way around, adding 2 little accent beads. Now at this particular point, if you decide you would like to make it a picot, you can add that 3rd bead in the middle. I kind of like the way that this came out. I had originally planned to make another pass through, but I really like the way this looks, so I left it alone. Excuse me. Now that you're coming out of the top of the next crystal, just pick up 2 more 11-0s and then sew down through the crystal right next to it. And then up through the next, and so on and so forth. So it's really simple, this step here. You just need to make sure that you're not grabbing any threads underneath as you sew down through the next crystal. That's all. Sorry about that. It's just the shininess of these little crystals and my real bright lighting sometimes makes it a little hard for me to see where I'm putting the needle. All right, so just continue on adding your 2 little accent beads between each pair of crystals all the way around, and I'll meet you guys back, and I'll show you how to end up your thread. So you can see here that as I add those last 2 beads and I pass down through the last crystal, when I go back up, I'm going to go back up into the very first crystal where I started from to create the veil. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew through the beads of this veil one more time. And that's going to add an extra layer of thread within the veil just to make it a little more secure. So I'm going to pass up through those first 2 beads. Then I'm going to pass across through the 1 bead at the top. I'm just going to give a little bit more shape to the veil also up here. And then we'll come down the 2 beads on the other side. I kind of like for that 3rd bead to be a little more pronounced. And I could have done it differently, but I'm just going to go ahead and not worry about it. So now that I've come out of that last bead there on the veil beads, I'm just going to come down through that crystal right beneath it. And we have completed adding the accent beads. And you'll notice that it came out just a slightly bit different with the bead count. And I had noticed that when I was working that for some reason or another, the bead count kind of changed around on me a little bit. But that's okay because they're still identical and they still look really great. And in overall essence, they're pretty much the same size. The bead layout remained the same and everything looks really good. So now what we need to do is just simply end off our working thread. And you can see where I'm exiting underneath that crystal. I'm just going to take my needle and pass it through between those 2 beads so I can come around to the back like this. Now what you need to do in order to end this thread is just weave it off. So just basically you're going to go up and down through the crystals, and I'll show you a little trick of how to add a loop, what I call the loop-de-loop. So I'm going to come up through the next crystal just like I normally would. And then I'm going to come down the crystal beside it. You can sew through those accent beads again, but I don't want too much white thread showing there, so I'm just going to come down the crystal right beside of it. I'm going to make sure that my working thread stays on the back side of those 2 seed beads as I pull. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up through the crystal on the right again. And that kind of locks that thread. Now this time when I come down the one on the left, I am going to continue on through the remaining crystals. So I'll come this way, right back down the one on the left. Pull everything nice and secure. And then I'm going to step up into the next crystal in line, right there. And I'm going to work down a few sets here before I do that lock that thread again. So I will come down the next crystal down. Sorry if I'm getting out of frame. I just have a little bit of difficulty seeing the hole for these crystals with this bright light. So now I'm going to make sure you don't pass through your interfacing. You just want to come out of the crystal and that's it. Just like this. And once again, I want to keep this thread on the back side of those 2 seed beads. And come up the next one. And on this next set of crystals is probably where I will lock the thread again. You stay on the back side. If you pass under that thread, see how I've passed under that thread where I have the orange on it? Don't worry about it. I'm going to come up and then I'm just going to simply come back under it like this to get keep my thread where I need for it to be. So now I'm going to come down, there's crystal right beside it. Just like this. And I'm going to come up the crystal on the right again, just like we did on the previous set of beads. And I've accidentally went under that orange thread again, so I need to come back under. And a lot of times, it's just a matter of noticing what your needle does can make all the difference in the world in how professional your finished product looks. Because you want to make sure if you're going under those threads, you got to come back out, you know. And that way you don't wind up with a lot of white thread or exposed thread showing across the top of the, you know, the portion that I painted orange. So now I have locked that thread. I'm going to just move on to the next crystalline line. I'm going to come right back up through the very next crystal. And I'm going to do this probably all the way down till I go around the corner, the curve here, and then I can stop and simply cut my thread. And it will be have been woven in enough to where it's not going to come loose and everything's going to stay nice and secure. So you just keep working until you have secured the thread to your particular preference, and then we will just simply end our thread by cutting it or burning it with the thread burner. And that's up to you too. Also, it's your preference. All right, so that is it, guys. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me keep on weaving off. I showed you exactly what to do. And now we have this cute little set of components that we can use to make a beautiful pair of earrings. All right. So about all you really have to do is just add your earring finding here at the top, and everything is all finished. All right, folks, I really hope that you have enjoyed, as much as I have, working with these beautiful Potomac bead crystals, and that you will head over to their website and check out some of these gorgeous, beautiful, exclusive beads and finishes and other items that they have there. Of course, you're going to find a whole range of products that you're familiar with working with, such as Delicas. The Toho, version of a cylinder bead is the Treasures and 8-Ohs. You'll have 15-Ohs, 11-Ohs, 8-Ohs, everything you need to work with these beautiful products and make some gorgeous seed bead and crystal jewelry of your own. All right, thanks for watching, folks. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. This is Detrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique signing off.